Thank you, thank you. The reason that I created this podcast is because I want to feel better. So many of the right-wing talk show hosts that I've listened to over the years make me feel worse, more anxious, more fearful, angrier. And I want to feel better, and I want the people who listen to my podcast to feel better after having listened to it than they did at the beginning.
Going to Vegas for a couple of days. I always go over there. You meet so many wonderful, wonderful people in Vegas. You have no idea.
Can you tell us about a few of them?
Last time I was there, I met a lovely girl. Oh, a lovely girl. Valerie Dubois.
Valerie Dubois.
Oh, lovely girl. Valerie Dubois. In fact, she told me to call her VD for short. It was rough when I was a kid.
Yeah?
I was a kid the first time I had my picture taken. The pony threw me. Another one I should have.
You got to try him out of town, right? You can't bring him in.
Take him on a road to you. Take him on a road. You got to break him in. So you ever get the feeling you wasted your whole life?
Huh?
I don't know. It's not easy. I got no respect the day I was born.
Really?
No respect. The doctor picked me up and smacked me. I found out the nurse. She got a few in, too.
Good morning. It's Tuesday, Trump Tuesday, March the 26th, and this is The True Conservative. Welcome to all the butchers, bakers, and candlestick makers out there. I'm Ron, your host, and the only true conservative in the United States today. So today, after the Serenity Prayer and the patriotic song of the day, we will have the patriotic shorts, motivation, Bishop Barron, Ayn Rand, the 33 strategies of war, and a selection from Donald Trump. All that and more when I get back. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I should not change, the courage to change the things I should, and the wisdom to know the difference. Amen. Thank you. And now, cars.
I would like to show you $7,000, sitting on my shop floor. You're all familiar with them. We all hate them. Catalytic converters and DPFs. We're changing this one out. We've reconditioned it twice for a delivery company here. Keeps throwing the dang code. I'm going to tell you how to avoid, and that's what this company, I've talked to them about it, and hopefully they'll get a little longer life out of this next DPF we put in here. The new one, we're going to replace that. Let me tell you what ruins them more than anything else. Tunes, excessive fuel, idling for prolonged periods. We get these sprinters in here with DPFs on them, anything with DPFs on them, but the sprinters, the people that are living in them, a lot of people doing that now, kind of traveling around and living their life that way, and it's pretty cool, actually. We love those people. They're fun to work for. But they sit in there and they'll idle the van to get warmed up or whatever, and man, that just soots up your DPF. So stop doing that is the best thing I could tell you to not have a DPF that goes south on you, because they are so expensive. Why direct injection? Why we have it? And I think there's benefits to it. The first benefit is you can increase your compression ratio with direct injection, so that gives you an instant horsepower gain just by increasing your compression ratio. That's the first benefit. The other benefit is it gives you a cleaner burn, and I know manufacturers are trying to deal with the federal emission standards. Some of the downside to direct injection that people are commenting on is you get a lot of buildup on the back of the intake valve. The only way to get rid of that is by physically cleaning that off, and we use that my video on walnut shell blasting. A lot of people said that, why do you do that? Just let it go. Because anytime you get that buildup on the intake valve, you're restricting the amount of air that can get into your combustion chamber. This is a piston for direct injection. They're always going to look a little weird, and this is just a regular gas piston. I hope that answers some questions about direct injection. It's a good thing. Gives you more horsepower. It needs a little bit of maintenance, but I don't think it's that big a deal.
Why has everyone seen the logo for this oil additive, and what does STP even mean? The company started in 1954. In 1961, Studebaker bought STP and sued Mott Paxton Superchargers from Andy Granatelli, who was put in charge of STP, and his marketing tactics boomed. Granatelli introduced the crazy logo suit at the Indy 500 circa 1964, and STP sponsored many cars, like Mario Andretti, who won in 69. And in 1972, they started up with Richard Petty. STP stickers were everywhere, from the logo to the flower and race cars. But what did STP mean? It started as scientifically treated petroleum. Some say that Studebaker tested products appeared in advertising, but I've only ever found scientifically tested products. These days, STP means science, technology, performance. And yes, that was Suzanne Summers.
My boys have looked at this, and I'm going to confer with them. This is 6.7 Power Stroke head. And if you look here, these are the injector hold-down bolt holes. And I've got a crack here, and I got another crack here. Now, we can fix that. We can TIG weld that. I'm not that big. And then we'll put a steel insert, a time insert in them threads. But my genius son, Joey, thinks that how that happened is somebody working on his truck replaced injectors, and then when they reinstalled them, they had oil down in the bottom of them holes, and then, when they went to torque it down, they hydrolocked the hole, and basically, fluid's got to go somewhere. It's either that or they over-torqued them, but the threads are not pulled or anything like that down in the hole. Anybody out there seeing this? When we're removing injectors, we're getting oil down in here and not blowing the holes out. Don't forget, you got to blow your holes, man.
Would you spend over $30,000 for a 30-year-old Dodge? Well, you might have to, because these second-gen Cummins are getting super sought after and really desirable. And a large part of that is down to the engine. This is called the 6BT, but it's a Cummins inline six-cylinder. And these are old-school mechanical. No electronics needed to make these engines run, and they go forever. This one has 265,000 miles and still runs like a dream. But a large part about why these trucks are so desirable is just because they sound and drive fantastic. Listen to what this engine sounds like. Unreal, and they're so fun to drive. 5-speed manual transmission, 4-wheel drive, super plasticky dash, kind of like a McDonald's kids toy in here, but really old school, and every single part in this truck is fairly cheap and affordable to buy.
This is how an engine breathes. It sucks in air. A lot of guys like to, replace the factory air filter with, the aftermarket ones. This happens to be a K&N, really famous, and they make a quality filter. But what happens is, this is what I want to show you on this one. This is supposed to be an oil filter. Customers are just, washing these, and they're not oiling them. They're not working. If you don't buy that kit and put a film of oil on this, you're sucking crap into your engine. Here's another thing I want to show you. Now, this one has it installed in here. They put this shield in here because they're still wanting to draw. This is where the factory air box was. They still want to draw cold air. This is where you run into a problem. Do not, if you didn't draw cold air and you had this air filter on here, and I see them all the time, and they're just sitting there drawing all that hot air off the radiator and stuff like that, don't do that. Today I got something super juicy for you. It's a Mercedes. Now, why is this juicy? It's an AMG, it's a nice Mercedes. It came from the dealer, and the guy brought it to us for a second opinion because the dealer told him he needed an engine. It starts, it runs. Got a little bit of a noise there. Now, let's go up and kind of listen to that. It had a little bit of noise on startup. I'm trying to give you all the information I got. Now, it's nice and quiet. I pulled the dipstick. I haven't cut the oil filter open, but I don't have any noises like an engine rod knock. I've pulled the codes on the car, and I'm going to tell you what they are. I got a turbo supercharger under boost condition and a right front wheel speed sensor. His complaint is that it's been overheating on him. So my question to you all out there, why would the dealer tell them they need an engine on that? What would you do first to try to figure out what's wrong with this thing? Let me know. We've got a 6.0 Power Stroke here that came to us with losing coolant and smoking. Let's start up, see how it sounds. Yeah. Nice.
Which truck brand lasts the longest?
It's a really hard question because it just depends on how you maintain it, but I'm going to go with probably Chevy. It's the one I work on the least of the new ones.
Hey, Devin, which truck brand lasts the longest?
Toyotas.
Hey, Mark, what truck brand lasts the longest?
Toyota.
What truck brand lasts the longest?
Oh, man, I don't know. I would say Ford and Chevy are probably the longest lasting ones.
We've got this 6.7 Cummins here that we pulled out of, we'll call it Huff and Puff, the truck that's got a lot of blow-by. So we pull these rockers off. We're going to be inspecting our push rods. We're going to make sure that both tips aren't wore out, and we'll clean them up and look at them again. But right now I'm looking for preliminary, a bent push rod or anything like that. I think this thing's a huffer and puffer because I had an injector that went rogue on me and just started squirting like a cutting torch and ate a hole in the piston. I'll bet that's what we're going to find. But we'll pull the head off and see if I'm right. There it is right there. And that's what the injector did. So here's a better shot of our hole that excessive fuel burned right in the piston. You got 350 PSI of compression that's going through that hole. And that's why this thing, we're going to call it the Huff and Puff.
And that was Cars. Thank you. And now, the Patriotic Shorts.
You ever peed your pants?
Sure.
Yeah. It's pretty scary in the beginning. I resolved myself that I wasn't going to come back alive anyway by that time. And I think my attitude started changing. And it wasn't a cocky attitude. It was just, if it's there, it's there. I'll never feel it. I'll never hear it. And if I do hear it, I'll never remember it, But it was just a matter of survival, day to day. You never planned anything for the next day because you didn't know whether you'd be there or not. I just decided, what, they tell me what to do, I'm going to go do it.
It was the early morning of November 21st, 2010, and Lance Corporal Kyle Carpenter and another Marine, Nick Eufrazio, were manning a rooftop security post during defense of a village in Helmand Province, Afghanistan, when the Taliban initiated an attack with hand grenades, one of which landed inside their sandbag position. Without hesitation and with complete disregard for his own safety, Lance Corporal Carpenter moved toward the grenade in an attempt to shield his fellow Marine from the deadly blast. When the grenade detonated, his body absorbed the brunt of the blast, severely wounding him but saving the life of his fellow Marine. Carpenter's jaw and right arm were shattered, and he lost his right eye and most of his teeth. He went through roughly 40 surgeries during his recovery. On June 19, 2014, Carpenter was awarded the Medal of Honor for his courage, valor, and heroism. He is the 8th living recipient to be awarded the Medal of Honor for actions in Afghanistan. God bless Lance Corporal Kyle Carpenter.
What happens if a pilot surrenders in the middle of a dogfight? The way to surrender will surprise you. Let me explain. If you want to show that you're surrendering to an enemy fighter jet, your landing gear must be deployed. After that, the aircraft is expected to stop attacking and escort the aircraft to the nearest military airport. But this isn't a written rule. There is another way to surrender. In 1972, a pair of F-4s lost the MiG-17 they were going after. So 2 F-8 pilots took over the intercept mission. These F-8s were one of the most feared aircraft in the Vietnam War. However, after finally spotting the MiG-17, the pilots raced toward what appeared to be a certain takedown. Lieutenant Tucker could clearly see the enemy jet, so he took the lead. He positioned his F-8 just behind the jet so he could get a hit. But just as he was about to fire the missile, the MiG pilot ejected. The law says that the pilot of a fighter jet can surrender by ejecting and parachuting to the ground.
I get a call from the FBI saying that ISIS was trying to recruit somebody locally to find me and my family and where we lived to come and kill us. Because, dude, I've been traveling all over the world. What you're telling me is that these idiots are going to come to my house in Texas? So I call my friend that works for Fox News. He's like, hey, man, can you put me on live? And they're like, yeah. I'm like, all right, check it out. So my address, so I get live on Fox News, and I say my address live on Fox Television. I was like, you can send absolutely anybody that you want to my house to try and kill me and my family. Just know that you're never going to get them back. I'm going to kill them all.
How did this go down with your wife?
She was so mad at me. Yeah, she's like, I'm out. And she popped smoke just for a day. But then she came right back because,
Just before both of his engines flamed out and he began plummeting towards the icy North Atlantic waters, the Canadian pilot's main concern had been his fuel level. As the last of 4 F-5s to refuel, he had been relieved to finally hook up to the tanker's basket and begin replenishing his nearly depleted fuel tank. But just as he began to relax, he heard 2 ominous pops from his engines, and his jet suddenly entered into a free fall. As he fell, the cockpit became depressurized and filled with a thick fog that made it nearly impossible to read his instruments. He managed to maneuver into a glide, but knew if he didn't restart his engines soon, he'd end up ejecting into the frigid ocean. Thinking quickly, he slammed the throttles forward, hoping to force the afterburners to automatically relight. That worked. But it wasn't the end of his troubles, because after locating his squadron, he began refueling once more, when suddenly his left engine caught fire. So with just one good engine left, he finally diverted to Iceland, no doubt ready to call it a day.
Communist system was crumbling. The economy was in shambles. They decided to impose martial law. They arrested, there are different estimates, from 25 to 60,000 people. Military police were raiding citizens' homes and arresting them. Sometimes the children were left in the house, in the apartments, with no supervision because the parents were detained, arrested. This is where me and friends of mine were printing underground, we call it underground, those are bulletins. we call it newspaper, but it was basically a leaflet with 2 pages, just telling people what is really going on, collecting information, who is getting arrested. They try to disseminate to people so people know what is happening. And the information is the most dangerous thing to totalitarian socialist system. So we were very promptly, I think, tracked down and arrested. That's how I ended up with a 3 years prison sentence and sent to the harshest Polish prison at the time.
First landing came at 10:30 or so. Didn't run into any enemy initially, but maybe a half an hour after B Company started looking around, they found a North Vietnamese soldier, unarmed, very ragged, and an empty canteen. There are arguments about whether he was a scout, whether he was a deserter or whatever. But he was the first prisoner we ever captured, so Colonel Moore and the command group, which included an interpreter, went up to talk to this guy. He said that there are 3 battalions of North Vietnamese soldier on that mountain. He turned around and pointed to the Chupong Mountain, and they very much want to find and kill Americans. So this kind of changed the whole tenure of what we were there to do. And we knew there were enemy, probably more enemy than we really wanted to find, but we weren't about to leave.
My dad was in Saudi, and he said, hey, you're going to come visit. I'm in high school. I got a girlfriend, man. He was like, cool, you're still coming to visit. So I was pissed. First couple of days, I just acted like a punk, trying to show him that I was upset, ignoring him. And he's just being a good dad, like taking me, introducing me to folks. Like on the 3rd or 4th day, we're driving on base. I'm in the passenger seat just looking out the window, and I see this gate closing, blacked out gate with barbed wire fence, and I'm looking in there. There's a bunch of dudes with no shirt, jacked, tattoos, beards. I'm like, Dad, who are those dudes? And I thought they were SEALs. My dad corrected me. Dude, that was 5th group. And I was like, okay, I thought it was SEALs. My dad took me over to introduce me to those guys, and they took me under their wing, man.
No kidding.
Yeah, they let me hang out. I got to ask questions. I'm like a 14-year-old kid. I wanted to be Special Forces. Inevitably, that evolved to being a SEAL. I was working out with those guys. From what I remember, they had guns out, cleaning them. They were talking to me about their missions. It was so cool.
Damn, at 14?
14. So when I came back home, life was like, boom, this is what I'm going to do.
You don't learn how to be a SEAL in buds. You just learn how to suffer. Yeah. And then you go to SUT and you get a little taste of what it's like to learn some tactics, but you don't really know anything still. And you get to shoot a little bit, but it's not that much. So I didn't have that much. And I didn't grow up in a rural area where I had access to guns. And so I didn't shoot. I had very little shooting experience showing up to sniper school. So that was hard. And actually, if I remember this correctly, there was a point where I almost did not make it through because you have to get a certain score on the rifle. But something clicked. I mean, if you just stick with the points of performance, front sight focus, body positioning, follow through, breathing, like they work, right?
I was born in Norfolk, Virginia, June the 13th, 1922. My family was Jewish. We knew that sooner or later that the United States was going to be involved in the war. I was only 18, 19 years old. I signed up at Fort Monroe, Virginia, to go into the 506 Parachute Infantry.
And that was the Patriotic Shorts. Back in a minute. Thank you. And now a little motivation.
Some of the trouble and heartache we find ourselves in, if we look back, we knew we were supposed to make a change, but we didn't do it. We didn't want to rock the boat. We didn't want to upset people. But what you're not willing to walk away from is where you'll stop growing.
I don't know how to start improving my life. Someone might say that. And I would say, well, you're not aiming low enough. There's something you could do that you are regarding as trivial, that you could do, that you would do, that would result in an actual improvement. But it's not a big enough improvement for you, so you won't lower yourself enough to take the opportunity.
You may have made mistakes. We all have. But don't let guilt stunt your growth. Come out from under that shade. Quit thinking about all the things you've done wrong, living in regrets, thinking you've seen your best days. When you live guilty, you're in agreement with the enemy. He's called the accuser. He'll remind you of every mistake you've made for the last 20 years. He'd love for you to go through life feeling wrong about yourself. What he's trying to do is stunt your growth. He'll do his best to keep you in the shade. He knows your potential. He knows you were created to soar. That's why he works overtime trying to make us feel guilty, whispering, you don't measure up. You failed again. You blew your diet. You didn't spend enough time with your children. There's always some reason to be down on ourselves. You have to put your foot down and say, no thanks, I'm not living under that shade. I know I'm forgiven. I'm redeemed. My past is over. My present is secure. My future is bright.
You have to accept the fact that you can set yourself a goal that you can attain, and there's not going to be much glory in it to begin with. Because if you're not in very good shape, the goal that you could attain tomorrow isn't very glorious. But it's a hell of a lot better than nothing, and it beats the hell out of bitterness, and it's way better than blaming someone else. It's way less dangerous. And you could do it.
Getting better is a campaign. It's a campaign. It's a daily, a weekly, it's an hourly fight. An incessant fight that doesn't stop against weakness and against temptation and against laziness. It's a campaign of discipline. It's a campaign of hard work and dedication. It's waking up early and going to bed late and grinding out every second in between. Every single day. So, you want to get better? You want to self-improve? Stop looking for a shortcut and go find your alarm clock and find your discipline and find your guts and your passion and your drive and find your will.
Practice makes improvement. You can always better your best. You can always go beyond anything that you have ever done. You'll never hit a state of perfection. You're always bigger than what you do. And so all you're looking for are new breakthroughs through practice and practice and practice. You'll get better and better and better. And there's still some things that will happen to you that will catch you on the blind side that you did not anticipate. You'll get knocked down, but you won't be knocked out. You'll be able to get to your feet again, be on the ropes, but you have a fast recovery rate when you work on yourself.
If you're small, you don't get much. Small in comprehension, small in the ability to think and wonder, small in appreciation, no matter how much is poured out. Prosperity can be poured out on the whole country. Some people don't get much. Why? They're too small in their thinking, too small in their ability to share, have not expanded to their full capacity. Don't be like that.
We've got to consciously and deliberately imagine what we do want. If we will take and sit down with a pen and ask ourselves, what do I really want? What do I really want? And write it down. And then make a written description of it in the present tense. Writing causes thinking. Thinking creates an image. And you get these images going, you're building a vision in your mind. It's the visionaries that change the world.
To those who have everything, more will be given. From those who have nothing, everything will be taken. It's like what's very pessimistic in some sense, because it means that as you start to fail, you fail more and more rapidly. But it also means that as you start to succeed, you succeed more and more rapidly. And so you take an incremental step, and, well, now you can lift 55 pounds instead of 52.5 pounds. You think, well, what the hell's that? It's like it's one step on a very long journey. And so it starts to compound on you. So a small step today puts you in a position to take a slightly bigger step the next day. And then that puts you in a position to take a slightly bigger step the next day. And you do that for 2 or 3 years, man, you're starting to stride.
How high could you go if you made some adjustments? The good news is the potential is still in you. You can still become who you were created to be. You just have to get out from under that shade. Remove what's blocking your growth and you'll begin to blossom. You'll go to new levels. There's nothing wrong with you. You have the life of Almighty God in you. He created you to rise higher, to be successful, confident, to leave your mark.
That it's necessary for us to begin to look at the future and know that it's possible that we can have our dream. Yes, it is. Other people have done it, then we can do it. We fail a lot of times. Well, a lot of other folks fail. And eventually they came back and they succeeded. So it's possible we can have what we want. And we know that we want to get it. It's necessary that we align ourselves with people that think like we do. It's necessary we get negative, do-nothing people out of our lives. It's necessary we never stop learning and growing and developing ourselves. It's necessary that we never give up. We know that it's you, it's me. It's being responsible for our stuff and deciding that we're going to keep on keeping on, that we're going to find a way to win or find a way to make it happen. And we know it's hard. It's not going to be a picnic. Yes, it's hard. It's hard. And we will do it hard. And once we do it hard and we go through it, we realize it was worth it. And once you discover it was worth it, it is done.
And that was a little bit of motivation. Back in a minute. Thank you. And now, the daily law for March the 26th.
March 26th. Pay attention to negative cues. In the Arthur Conan Doyle story, Silver Blaze, Sherlock Holmes solves a crime by paying attention to what did not happen. The family dog had not barked. This meant that the murderer must have been someone the dog knew. What this story illustrates is how the average person does not generally pay attention to what we shall call negative cues, what should have happened but did not. It is our natural tendency to fixate on positive information, to notice only what we can see and hear. It takes a creative type such as Holmes to think more broadly and rigorously, pondering the missing information in an event, visualizing this absence as easily as we see the presence of something. For centuries, doctors considered diseases exclusively as something stemming from outside the body attacking it. A contagious germ, a draft of cold air, miasmic vapors, and so on. Treatment depended on finding drugs of some sort that could counteract the harmful effects of these environmental agents of disease. Then, in the early 20th century, the biochemist Frederick Gowland Hopkins, studying the effects of scurvy, had the idea to reverse this perspective. What caused the problem in this particular disease, he speculated, was not what was attacking from the outside, but what was missing from within the body itself. In this case, what came to be known as vitamin C. Thinking creatively, he did not look at what was present, but precisely at what was absent in order to solve the problem. This led to his groundbreaking work on vitamins and completely altered our concept of health. Daily law. The ability to loosen our mind, to alter our perspective, is a function of our imagination. Learn to imagine more possibilities than you generally consider. Avoid fixating only on what is present. Ponder what is absent. Mastery, Chapter 5. Awaken the dimensional mind, the creative active.
And that was the daily law for March the 26th. Pay attention to negative cues from The Daily Laws by Robert Greene. Back in a minute. Thank you. Now, Bishop Robert Barron.
Everything in this world finally has this quality of evanescence. It doesn't last. So yeah, I've labored like crazy, built up this business, I made a lot of money. That's a good thing. It's not going to last because you're going to fade away and it's all going to go to somebody else. Should I just be depressed then? No. I should be detached. Yeah, it's good. Wealth, power, pleasure. Take it in and then let it go. Enjoy it. Sure, the way you enjoy like a firework going off. Boom, there it is. Look how beautiful that burst of light and color. And then it's gone. Do I despair? No, I just kind of learn to live in that present moment, savoring what I can, but also letting go. Why? Because I realize that the true good, the truly beautiful, belongs to a higher world. I can sense it in these things, but none of the things in the world last. And so if I cling to them, they disappear. Wear the world lightly.
And that was Bishop Robert Barron. Back in a minute. Thank you. And now, the Ayn Rand thought of the day. Quote, capitalism has been called the system of greed, yet it is the system that raised the standard of living of its poorest citizens to heights no collectivist system has ever begun to equal. Unquote. And that was the Ayn Rand thought of the day. Back in a minute. Thank you. And now we pick up where we left off with the 33 strategies of war.
Reversal. There is neither point nor honor in seeking direct battle for its own sake. That kind of fighting, however, may have value as part of a maneuver or strategy. A sudden envelopment or powerful frontal blow when the enemy is least expecting it can be crushing. The only danger in maneuver is that you give yourself so many options that you yourself get confused. Keep it simple. Limit yourself to the options you can control. Here are further reflections on the ripening for the sickle strategy. By Byzantine Emperor Mauricius. Warfare is like hunting. Wild animals are taken by scouting, by nets, by lying in wait, by stalking, by circling around, and by other such stratagems rather than by sheer force. In waging war, we should proceed in the same way, whether the enemy be many or few. To try simply to overpower the enemy in the open, hand to hand and face to face, even though you might appear to win, is an enterprise which is very risky and can result in serious harm. Apart from extreme emergency, it is ridiculous to try to gain a victory which is so costly and brings only empty glory. From The Art of Maneuver by Robert R. Leonhard. Addicts of attrition, as Simkin calls them, generally cannot think beyond the battle, and they consider that the only way, or at least the preferred way, to defeat an enemy is to destroy the physical components of his army, especially the combat portions. Armored fighting vehicles, troops, guns, etc. If the attrition addict appreciates war's intangibles at all, such as morale, initiative, and shock, he sees them only as combat multipliers with which to fight the attrition battle better. If the attrition warrior learns about maneuver, he sees it primarily as a way to get to the fight. In other words, he moves in order to fight. Maneuver theory, on the other hand, attempts to defeat the enemy through means other than simple destruction of his mass. Indeed, the highest and purest application of maneuver theory is to preempt the enemy. That is, to disarm or neutralize him before the fight. If such is not possible, the maneuver warrior seeks to dislocate the enemy forces, i.e., removing the enemy from the decisive point, or vice versa, thus rendering them useless and irrelevant to the fight. If the enemy cannot be preempted or dislocated, then the maneuver warfare practitioner will attempt to disrupt the enemy, i.e., destroy or neutralize his center of gravity, preferably by attacking with friendly strengths through enemy weaknesses. By Napoleon Bonaparte. Aptitude for maneuver is the supreme skill in a general. It is the most useful and rarest of gifts by which genius is estimated. From The Art of War by Sun Tzu. Now the army's disposition of force is like water. Water's configuration avoids heights and races downward. Water configures its flow in accord with the terrain. The army controls its victory in accord with the enemy. Thus, the army does not maintain any constant strategic configuration of power. Water has no constant shape. One who is able to change and transform in accord with the enemy and wrest victory is termed spiritual. From Aesop's Fables. The Reed and the Olive.
The reed and the olive tree were arguing over their steadfastness, strength, and ease. The olive taunted the reed for its powerlessness and pliancy in the face of all the winds. The reed kept quiet and didn't say a word. Then, not long after this, the wind blew violently. The reed, shaken and bent, escaped easily from it, but the olive tree, resisting the wind, was snapped by its force. The story shows that people who yield to circumstances and to superior power have the advantage over their stronger rivals. The Campaigns of Napoleon by David G. Chandler. Of course, this beautiful simplicity of strategic movement, with its infinite flexibility, is extremely deceptive. The task of correlating and coordinating the daily movements of a dozen or more major formations, all moving along separate routes, of ensuring that every component is within 1 or at most 2 days' marching distance of its immediate neighbors, and yet at the same time preserving the appearance of an arbitrary and ill-coordinated scatter of large units in order to deceive the foe concerning the true gravity of his situation. This is the work of a mathematical mind of no common caliber. It is in fact the hallmark of genius, that infinite capacity for taking pains. The ultimate aim of all this carefully considered activity was to produce the greatest possible number of men on the battlefield, which on occasion had been chosen months in advance of the actual event. Bourrienne gives his celebrated eyewitness account of the first consul in the early days of the Italian campaign of 1800, lying full length on the floor, pushing colored pins into his maps and saying, "I shall fight him here, on the plain of the Scrivia," with that uncanny prescience which was in reality the product of mental calculations of computer-like complexity. After considering every possible course of action open to the Austrian melas, Bonaparte eliminated them one by one, made allowance for the effect of chance on events, and came up with the answer, subsequently borne out by the events of June 14th on the field of Marengo, which lies, surely enough, on the plain bounded by the rivers Bormida and Scrivia. From Characters by Jean de la Bruyère. The warrior and the statesman, like the skillful gambler, do not make their luck, but prepare for it, attract it, and seem almost to determine their luck. Not only are they, unlike the fool and the coward, adept at making use of opportunities when these occur, they know furthermore how to take advantage, by means of precautions and wise measures, of such and such an opportunity, or of several at once. If one thing happens, they win. If another, they are still the winners. The same circumstance often makes them win in a variety of ways. These prudent men may be praised for their good fortune as well as their good management, and rewarded for their luck as well as for their merits. From The Art of Maneuver by Robert R. Leonhard. Expanding on the issue of directive control, Lind introduces the reader to a decision-making model known as the Boyd cycle. Named for Colonel John Boyd, the term refers to the understanding that war consists of the repeated cycle of observation, orientation, decision, and action. Colonel Boyd constructed his model as a result of his observations of fighter combat in the Korean War. He had been investigating why American fighter pilots had been consistently able to best enemy pilots in dogfights. His analysis of opposing aircraft led to some startling discoveries. Enemy fighters typically outperformed their American counterparts in speed, climb, and turning ability, but the Americans had the advantage in two subtly critical aspects. First, the hydraulic controls allowed for faster transition from one maneuver to another. Second, the cockpit allowed for a wide field of view for the pilot. The result was that the American pilots could more rapidly observe and orient to the tactical situation moment by moment. Then, having decided what to do next, they could quickly change maneuvers. In battle, this ability to rapidly pass through the observation, orientation, decision, action loop, the Boyd cycle, gave the American pilots a slight time advantage. If one views a dogfight as a series of Boyd cycles, one sees that the Americans would repeatedly gain a time advantage each cycle, until the enemy's actions become totally inappropriate to the changing situations. Hence, the American pilots were able to out-Boyd cycle the enemy, thus outmaneuvering him and finally shooting him down. Colonel Boyd and others then began to question whether this pattern might be applicable to other forms of warfare as well. From The Art of Maneuver by Robert R. Leonhardt. Mobility, defined as the ability to project power over distance, is another characteristic of good chess. It is the goal of a good chess player to ensure that each of his pieces can exert pressure upon a maximum number of squares rather than being bottled up in a corner, surrounded by other pieces. Hence, the chess master looks forward to pawn exchanges, infantry battles, if you will, not because he is trying to wear down the enemy, but because he knows that he can project the power of his rooks, mechanized forces, down the resulting open files. In this manner, the chess master fights in order to move. This idea is central to maneuver warfare theory. And lastly, from Samurai Zen, The Warrior Koans, by Trevor Leggett. Number 71. The Victory in the Midst of 100 Enemies. To priest Yozan, the 28th teacher at Enkakuji, came for an interview a samurai named Ryozan, who practiced Zen. The teacher said, "You are going into the bathtub stark naked without a stitch on. Now, 100 enemies in armor, with bows and swords, appear all around you. How will you meet them? Will you crawl before them and beg for mercy? Will you show your warrior birth by dying in combat against them? Or does a man of the way get some special holy grace?" Ryozan said, "Let me win without surrendering and without fighting." Test. Caught in the midst of the 100 enemies, how will you manage to win without surrendering and without fighting?
And that was the end of chapter 20, Maneuver Them into Weakness. And the next one is chapter 21, Negotiate While Advancing. From the 33 Strategies of War by Robert Greene. Back in a minute. Thank you. So if you're a Democrat, you should be voting Republican and become a Republican because the pressure's off. On the Democrat side of the ticket, the Democrats are under constant pressure to produce paradise and to produce it yesterday. The Democrat Party is about 50 years behind schedule. They should have created paradise about 50 years ago, but they failed to do so. So the pressure is on, the pressure is on, the pressure is on. Got to get the movement, got to get perfect. And from the time you get up in the morning until the time you go to bed at night, you're under the gun. Your fellow Democrats are looking at you, wondering why it is that you're going to Starbucks instead of doing something to create socialist paradise. But in the Republican Party, no such thing, because we're realistic. We know there's never been a paradise, there isn't now, and therefore there's not going to be any type of paradise other than the second coming of Jesus Christ. Back in a minute. Thank you. And now on Maria Bartiromo and Company, a little bit of Leo Terrell.
to break the Democrat stranglehold on people of color. They want opportunity. That exists with the Trump administration. The Democrats have basically assumed that blacks are going to vote for them. It's not going to happen, Maria. Joe Biden does not have a chance to get the black vote in this country this year. And if they don't have the black and brown vote, there's no Democratic Party.
So there you go. Now, what he's doing here is he's not stating the facts. He's usually about Mr. Facts and all that. What he's doing is he is issuing propaganda, and good for him. Facts are fine, but propaganda is power. Back in a minute. Thank you. And now, Donald Trump.
There's not going to be a President Donald Trump.
Donald Trump will not become president.
Donald Trump is not going to be president of the United States. Take it to the bank. Okay. I guarantee it. All right.
I think that man will be president of the United States right about the time that spaceships come down filled with dinosaurs and red capes.
Donald Trump has been saying that he will run for president as a Republican, which is surprising since I just assumed he was running as a joke.
Donald Trump, just last week, he confirmed to the National Review that he is again considering a run in 2016.
Do it. Do it. Look at me. Do it. I will personally write you a campaign check now on behalf of this country, which does not want you to be president, but which badly wants you to run.
I continue to believe Mr. Trump will not be president. Mr. Trump will not be president.
He will never be president of the United States.
And we better be ready for the fact that he might be leading the Republican ticket next.
I know you don't believe that, but I want to go on. Sorry to laugh.
Okay, here we are. And which Republican candidate has the best chance of winning the general election?
Of the declared ones, right now, Donald Trump.
And so, right now, Mr. Trump, to answer your call for political honesty, I just want to say, you're not going to be president. There is zero chance we'll be seeing you being sworn in on the Capitol steps with your hand on a giant golden Bible.
Donald Trump will never, ever be president of the United States.
Donald Trump will never be elected president of the United States.
Donald Trump is a here today, gone tomorrow candidate for president of the United States. Donald Trump is not going to be president of the United States. Ever respectful of the fact that the people have not voted, he's not going to be president of the United States.
Let's be clear. Donald Trump will lose the election.
We talk about him every day, and we continuously bash him.
He's not going to be the president. Don't worry about it.
Exactly.
This will be a wake-up call to the Republican Party. Despite Boris thinking that Donald Trump can win New York, the presidential race is over.
Could I just cut through? I have one thing to say, one thing only. And that is that this race is over.
President Obama will go down as perhaps the worst president in the history of the United States! Exclamation point at real Donald Trump. Well, at real Donald Trump. At least I will go down as a president.
So when you stand and deliver that State of the Union address, in no part of your mind or brain can you imagine Donald Trump standing up one day and delivering a State of the Union address?
Well, I can imagine it in a Saturday night skit.
I will faithfully execute
that I will faithfully execute
the office of President of the United States.
the office of President of the United States,
And will, to the best of my ability, preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States.
The Constitution of the United States.
So help me God.
So help me God.
Congratulations, Mr. President.
I'm honored to be able to introduce for the first time ever anywhere the 45th President of the United States of America, Donald J. Trump.
And that was Donald Trump. Back in a minute. This is Ron, your host, the only true conservative in the United States today, bidding adios to all the butchers, bakers, and candlestick makers out there, and reminding you that you are not neutral and that the government has no rights.